Well, hello there and welcome to Health Diary. My name is Winnie Lubembe and we're coming to you from the Dusit Princess Hotel and Residences right here in Nairobi. And in this week's episode of Health Diary, we'll be focusing on sickle cell disease, but with a special focus on family, because majority of the times there's a bit of fear, a lot of stigma and misinformation about the disease itself, where a lot of people would ask, so if I have the disease or the trait, will I be able to start a family? And if I do that, will my kids be devoid of the trait or the disease itself? Well, we'll find out after this fact of the matter. Sickle cell disease is a group of inherited red blood cell disorders. The specific type of sickle cell disease a person has depends on the genes they inherited from their parents. People with sickle cell disease inherit genes that contain instructions or a code for abnormal hemoglobin. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, if both parents have sickle cell trait, there is a 50% chance that any of their child will also have a sickle cell trait, or a 25% chance that any of their child will have sickle cell disease. However, if one parent has sickle cell disease and the other is completely unaffected, then all the children will have sickle cell trait. Well, let us understand what it is like to, first of all, be sickle cell warrior, but at the same time have a family, because there's a lot of debates and conversation and misinformation out there as far as sickle cell and family as well. Of course, to help us with that conversation today, we have Dr. Juma Wafula, who is the Sub-County Medical Officer of Health at Dagoretti. Good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we also have Joanne Chazima, who is the founder and executive director of Joanne Chazima Sickle Cell Foundation. But of most importance, you are married with 3 children. It's so good to have you today to really demystify all those myths that are there. But first of all, Dr. let's just start with the basics, right? Sickle cell, let's get to understand how the disease comes about before we talk to Joanne.
Sickle cell disease is a genetic disorder that medically we say is autosomal recessive, meaning you have to inherit 2 copies of the defective gene for you to express the symptoms of a disease. So in this disorder, we have hemoglobin. It's an issue to do with the hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a ion-containing protein that is found in red blood cells that helps transport oxygen. So in this hemoglobin, that protein is defective in such a way that there's some exchange, there's some replacement of amino acid. Amino acid are the building block of proteins. So this amino acid, which is normally valine, replaces the glutamic acid, which is now found in normal hemoglobin. So that in this case, we express it as HB. So in normal individuals, we express it as HbA. AA. So in those with sickle cell, we can express it as HbS. Okay. So we have different types of this HB, the hemoglobin. So the HbA is the adult hemoglobin. The HbS is the defective hemoglobin. Then you also have the HbF, that is the fetal hemoglobin that is found in infants that wears off after like 1 year or so.
Oh yeah, because I was about to ask, is it different in
yes,
children?
That one is fetal, so okay. HbF. Okay. From the fetus. So, and that's why now at the age of, before the age of 1 year, it's difficult to detect symptoms of sickle cell, signs and symptoms, because of the HbF that is within the circulation. This HbF normally is resistant to sickling, does not sickle like the adult, the HbS. So once this HbF now wears out, there's now production of the defective HbS that is now at risk of sickling.
And Joanne, let's go back, because again, Dr. said the HbF is difficult sometimes, to notice the symptoms, and especially because, like you said, it wears off at some point.
The fetal hemoglobin.
Exactly. Yes. So, but for you, let's go back. First of all, the symptoms. When were you diagnosed? And then we'll come back to now this whole different aspect of your life.
My diagnosis, first of all, I got it at 22.
Okay. Wow.
Interesting part. I got it at 22, but we had been sick. you know, my sister and I, we had been sick, but somehow we never got to be tested for sickle cell. My sister passed away when she had just turned 18, and obviously because of complications of sickle cell, and because we didn't know, so you know, we had no idea what we were treating. So yeah, my diagnosis I got at 22, which is way later on in life, way later on, because it could have been diagnosed, as
Earlier.
Dr. Harry says,
Yeah.
1 year.
Before you got your diagnosis, right? In primary school, and I'm going back to primary school because, no, was it primary, high school that you met
Primary.
your partner?
Primary.
Primary school, right? So you used to be sick.
Yes.
So do you want to just take us through what, you know, what happened, ideally, and then I think we'll get to understand why we're going back to
Yeah. Yes, I have been sick all my life, literally, even just being young and all that. But you see, we didn't know. So you'd fall ill, you're treated because you're not getting the right diagnosis. So yeah, you fall ill, you feel better a bit, you go back to school and all that. So yes, I knew my husband while we were in primary school because we were actually in the same class.
Okay.
So that's how we first met. Okay, we were not dating then. But then again, you know, like later on is when we met. After we met is like, we met in, like, I was just done with college. He was still in the university. And he was like, okay, you used to fall ill all the time. Are you better now? I mean, what was going on and things like that. And I told him, I have sickle cell. And this was after my diagnosis. I have sickle cell. And, you know, it's a lifelong thing. Yeah, it's a lifelong thing, and so it's something I have to live with. So it's not that one day it will.
Yeah, like
I'll
you get
get
off
better
your medication
and all
you'll
that.
be fine. No.
Yeah. So, but I think that particular time he didn't understand the gravity of the issue. I don't think he did, but he was still up for the challenge, and thank God for him. Number one, I was honest enough to like tell him. I know it's a challenge for many people to come out and say it, but you see, at the end of the day, you have to be okay with who you are first of all before anybody else will
I
accept
really like
it.
that. We should make that a quote. I really, really like that.
Because at the end of the day, if you do not, you know, like love yourself more, do you expect any other love?
Person to, yeah.
Yeah.
And they will treat you otherwise, yeah. And that's why you're here today, really, to tell people, listen, it is okay to, first of all, embrace this.
Yes.
And also, if you found that person that you feel, you know what,
It's
this
the
is going
one.
somewhere, then it's important to disclose it as soon as possible.
It is
right?
important. It's very important.
Okay. But at the same time, Dr. Juma, again, Joanne talked about late diagnosis. And I just want to understand, how much of a challenge is this? How much of a gap is this? And especially here in the country, because supposedly you could have met earlier, you didn't know, maybe, you know, your partner would not know, right? Or maybe someone else might not know that they have sickle cell, end up together, and, you know, how much of a risk that would be. So let's just first of all understand how important early diagnosis is.
Elsewhere, in other setups, like in the United States and other developed countries, we are able to test for sickle cell even before the baby is born, using the amniotic fluid and all. In our setup, we are still sorting food and water issues. So food and water will always come first before we do a test. So, and again, the tests that we have at times, they may fail to pick the diagnosis. For example, here in Kenya, there are several types of tests that we use to diagnose sickle cell.
So then what are some of the telltale signs that people really need to be on the lookout for, especially for parents, just to point out and say, hey, you know what, this could be. But again, to get the actual diagnosis, they need to get to the hospital. But what are some of these signs very quickly?
Mostly one of the most common sign is yellowness of the eyes, what we refer to as jaundice. In areas where sickle cell is endemic, like in western region of Kenya, in the coast, once you see someone with the yellowness of the eyes, the first thing that they'll ask you is, are you a sickler? Because they'll feel like there's a lot of breakdown, or rather lysis, breakdown of the red blood cells because of the sickling. I alluded earlier that there's the cells are unable to negotiate into minor blood vessels. So that is the most common sign. Another common sign is body pains. Yeah? The child can just come with a lot of body pains, recurrent infections. You treat an infection, after an infection, chest issues, a lot of chest pain will come in. So those are the mostly pain, and in most of the cases even pain is very common among sicklers of a known origin without any history of trauma. Hajaumia, hajaanguka, but they tell you, hey, my body is aching all over. So such kind of symptoms may make us have a high index of suspicion.
I see that. All right, we need to go on a break very quickly. But Chazima, listen, you cannot answer this in one in 1 minute. So let's just go on a break. But of course, when we come back, first of all, you just help us understand as an adult living with sickle cell, what is it like? What are some of the things that you've had to do? Because again, crisis, right? And
yes.
sometimes it will come up, and and there's kids that you need to look after, and of course there's family, there's work, and all those things. So we'll go through that after the break. But at the same time, I would want to understand. So then, before you got married, did you go through some tests just to make sure that your husband, because like you said, he did not really understand the gravity of this. Exactly. And Dr. what are some of these tests that are available for partners before settling down and deciding to have kids? But of course, all that is coming up after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The show is Health Diary. And if you're joining us right now, today we are focusing, yes, on sickle cell disease, but with a very different angle. And this is as far as marriage, okay? Because a lot of the times there's a lot of stigma and misinformation when it comes to sickle cell and marriage. A lot of people would ask, is it first of all possible to get married and have kids who do not have sickle cell disease? So that is what we are talking about today on the show. Of course, to help us with the same, we have Dr. Juma Wafula, Sub-County Medical Officer of Health, Dagoretti, and as well as Joan Chazima, who's the founder and executive director of Joan Chazima Sickle Cell Foundation. But of importance to today's conversation, she is married and a mom of 3. So, Joan, before we went on the break, of course, we were to talk about, a little bit about adults, sickle cell, children, partner. How do you manage? But even before that, let's just first of all talk about the test. Did you have to go through the test after you disclosed to your partner and told him, listen, I have sickle cell disease?
It's very important because number one, this is what I believe. I mean, people might have a different opinion, but I believe, especially now, because some of us know ourselves, you do not want to have a partner who is a carrier, because then that means your children will definitely be sick. So just to, if that is going to happen, at least you have an idea of, what to expect, but not you're doing it blindly. And when kids start falling ill and now we start the blame game, and that is what happens most of the time. That yes, you find, and what we have picked in the work we've been doing is you find men going and leaving the women with the children.
Take us through that. What exactly is it? Because again, we mentioned a bit of crisis, not even a bit, this crisis,
Pain, yes.
Right?
Yes.
And it's a lot of pain. And sometimes even the partner might not know what to do at that particular point.
Yes.
Yeah.
We start with ourselves.
Yeah.
Know how to take care of yourself. It's something that we learn to live with.
Can we just understand the career aspect of this without going too technical?
Okay. So the carrier aspect, it means that, as I said initially, you need 2 copies of the defective gene for you to express the symptoms, or for you to be labeled as a person with sickle cell disease. So if you have 1 copy, it means you will not express the symptoms, but you are now referred to as a carrier because you are not able to express the symptoms that she'll talk about. So in this case, you only have a single defective gene, while there, like as I initially said, there's HBA, HBS, and HBF. So here you have HBAS. So now you are labeled as a carrier. So you can only transmit your offspring. Your children can only be sicklers if the person the other party, the father or the mother, is either a sickle as well, or has a trait. Okay. So like if you get a situation,
John, is it okay if we use your
yes? It's getting too technical.
It's getting too technical. Yeah. Like for example, if you are a carrier, then you get married to a spouse, to someone who does not have sickle cell.
Okay.
There is no way any of your kids will have sickle cell if you are a carrier. The best they can get maybe is they'll also be carriers up to like 25%. But these are just probabilities. Of course, you can also have you can also be a sickler. We can also have the sickle cell disease, then get married to someone who does not have sickle cell disease, or rather who is also not a carrier. There, the chances of you having children with sickle cell disease are also minimal, because now your children can only be carriers.
Okay,
that's what
all
you
right,
mean.
Joanne. Because I also want to understand from your children as well.
Because now my partner is not a carrier.
He's not a carrier.
The gene.
Yes,
he's okay.
Yeah.
So now my children will only carry the one S gene from me.
Yes.
So they'll be AS. The AS meaning the S that is coming in is from me. So whatever happens now, if they decide to, marry or get married, they have to be careful that either they're not marrying someone with AS, because then that means their children will carry the gene. So for me to have SS, I got both genes from my
your parents. Yes. Okay, but now you have the
parents were carriers.
So my parents were carriers.
Were both carriers.
Yes.
Okay, and then you got
now
the gene.
I got
because you said
gene.
It was you and your sister. Do you have other?
We have other siblings.
Other siblings,
yes.
But are they?
They're okay.
They're okay.
They're okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that is where sometimes the confusion comes in family, because it would be easy for you and your sister to ask, but why us?
Exactly.
Right.
And as he says, it's all about probability and all that. So some up to 25% will be carriers. Some up to now, because of carrier parents, 50% of your children will carry the gene, will have SS, and then now there'll be 25% who will be okay.
Dr. What are some of those tests? Are they readily available in the country?
I'll just summarize it as DNA testing. So mostly, we don't do it routinely because, again, as I said, limited resource limitations. And mostly people marry for convenience. Because someone got pregnant, they just decided, like, come and stay.
Or others really just want to get married.
Others just really wanted to get married because of lack of information. They feel like, tuishi too, you get. So normally people don't do genetic testing routinely. So I think it is something that there should be some sort of sensitization. So that people actually get to have DNA test and confirm those other unwanted traits before actually making a decision to settle. We have the gene, the DNA testing. We also have the capillary zone that can detect the amount, rather the concentration of the HbS in the circulation. The sickling test may detect, but at times is not very accurate. So we may not want to bank so much on it, but we are not demonizing it, because in a resource limited setting, at times the only test that is available, and maybe the only test that is affordable for that. You may want to start with that, so that in case we detect any abnormality with the test, we may want also to advise based on what we get.
Okay. How soon would you advise someone to disclose? And in what way? Because like we said, since people don't really, a lot of people, right, don't really understand the disease itself and the magnitude of the same, it's very easy for it to be received with a lot of, right? Yes. So how soon would you say? And I don't know, like in what way, so that people really understand and we deal with the stigma?
That is a bit hard, because it depends with, myself, I would say as soon as possible. Okay. Because you don't want to
when it gets serious, because you don't.
Because you
don't want to tell everybody.
And no, you can't meet on day one and say this is what is happening. But yeah, when I guess it gets serious, please be honest about it, be open about that, because there's so many things, and I feel like you know, you keep this, but eventually, I'm imagining once you are married, you've gotten to that point of now you're married, and then you're going through these challenges. They're seeing you with medication, they're seeing you with what. So how will that person take it as well?
Dr. The test itself. For someone who's curious about the costs, I know it varies from hospital to hospital, if I'm not wrong. But generally, and then is it covered by insurance or is it an out-of-pocket
It's covered by
expense?
insurance. The cost, of course, will vary from hospital to hospital.
But approximately?
Approximately, okay, there are different tests. So maybe the most common one, the sickling test, is not more than 1,000 shillings in our setup. So that one I'm sure of. You can find it in most of the public facilities. For the other tests, they'll vary, even up to 10 to 20,000 to 40,000.
For now, allow us to say thank you. Dr. Juma Ofula, Sub-County Medical Officer of Health and Agrity, as well as Joanne Chazima, who's the founder and executive director of Joanne Chazima Sickle Cell Foundation. But above all, married and a mom of 3. So thank you so much, really, for coming. But you wanted to say something? Literally 10 seconds?
Yes, just 10 seconds. Yes.
Okay.
There's a lot of misconceptions about sickle cell, the myths and all that. But you see now, it's like, it might not be like any other disease, but yes, we have non-communicable diseases that people live with. Yeah. So it's just understand what it is, know how to take care of yourself. Yes, there's been a lot of sayings that we cannot live beyond a certain age, but we can if we just get the proper care, you know, and this, I mean medical care, and I mean even you as a patient and people around you, how are you taking care of yourself? Because you cannot expect a doctor to do everything for you. There are things you need to do as a person to be able to make sure that you're okay. So do your part, go for your checkups, do your follow-ups, and then also just be positive about life.
Positive, yes.
About life.
I mean, attitude.
It is possible.
Yes.
And yes, I have 3. And the last pregnancy was a twin pregnancy, which I didn't know I would be able to carry. But they're 5 now. So
nice.
Yes.
I
so
mean,
it is
look
possible.
at that.
It is possible. Yeah, it is possible.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Joanne, as well for that. All right. Well, time now for you to take a look at this health tip.
Flexology is a zone therapy where you work on the palms, the feet, the face, and the ears. So the benefits are it helps in distribution of energy throughout the body. It helps with anxiety, helps in improving sleeping patterns, especially for the insomnia patients, increased circulation, and it helps reducing pain.
Well, that marks the end of our conversation today on Health Diary, and I'm pretty sure you've learned just as much as I've learned as far as sickle cell disease in itself, and most importantly, family. But the most important thing is have the information, yes, but do not be afraid to go for the test. And this is as far as DNA testing is concerned. And would like to dedicate this week's episode of Health Diary to one of our colleagues, Merab, who has rested. She was a sickle cell warrior, but she has rested. So we say, may her soul rest in eternal peace. She dedicated her life and her work to passing information out there, dedicated journalist as far as health is concerned. So her work still lives on even as she has rested. So we want to say, may her soul rest in eternal peace. But we also want to say a special thanks to Dusit Princess Hotel and Residences for hosting us today. My name is Winnie Lubembe. If you have any other question as far as sickle cell disease is concerned, feel free to engage with us on our social media platforms. But until next time, adios. Of course, if you're joining us right now, I was told not to say of course because I say that a lot, probably. Hallelujah. On this week's episode of the Dead. Let's go. My feet. Wait, get your go. Okay.